Mark Vogt here, PONDSCUM Fly Fishing and Outfitters at Large out of North Aurora, Illinois, suburb of Chicago out west. We're sitting on the beloved Fox River, home of tons and tons of smallmouth bass, but they're small, 1 to 2 pounds. Which begs the question, how are you going to catch them on a fly rod? Deceptively simple. Everybody takes a trout rod, 2-weight, 3-weight, 4-weight, 5-weight, something like that, thinking that they're going to use that line to try to throw hardware that looks like this, a crayfish or a minnow. Doesn't work. Everybody knows it doesn't work. All the different stores continue to sell trout lines, things like this, and now people have come out with clouser lines. But a clouser line still requires that you have to do an aerial cast, your traditional back cast. It just doesn't work on a river like this. The guys out in west, out in the northwest, out in the Skagit River, came up with a Skagit line because they knew they had to throw really hard, really big hardware, and they had to throw it on a sinking tip, and they needed a lot of mass. They understood that. Fred Ward and the other guys, you got it all right. You need a ton of mass, like in this line. You need a ton of mass if you're going to throw heavy hardware that's out at the end. That's exactly the problem that we have on the trout on the Fox River. The Fox River has bass, but the bass are only, gosh, anywhere from 5 to 13 inches long. They're anywhere from 1 pound as a very typical number. 2 pounds is a really nice fish. But the thing is, they want to eat something big. They don't eat flies. So you can throw all the fly fishing rods that you want at them, and you're not going to be able to get what you need. What you need is to be able to throw something that looks like a minnow, something that looks like a crayfish, something that's anywhere from 1/4 to 1/3 the body length of the fish. That's what these guys go after. They don't go after flies. So what I put together, and it makes sense then that a Skagit rod is the thing to do. If a Skagit line is what has the mass to throw that kind of hardware, something with a brass head that gets down fast, if that's what you need, then the next question is, you need a Skagit rod to throw a Skagit line. But the problem with the Fox River is the fish are only 1 to 2 pounds. So if you've got a 15-foot, 12-weight rod, something kind of like a Skagit rod, throwing that kind of Skagit line, throwing that kind of monstrous fly, those guys are all catching 20-pound fish, 30-pound fish, 40-pound fish. The rod needs to be that big. We need something smaller. I started with a bunch of different rod layouts. I started with my favorite spey rods from Angler's Roost that are 12-foot, 5-6 weight rods, and they work great. But the problem is, you don't get to work anything close to you when you're trying to find bass, because at the very most you can only work 2 rod lengths out of the rod, out to maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 rod lengths. So there's always a swath that's right in front of you where the bass could be, and you can't work it with a fly rod. I started working my way down, getting a smaller and smaller rod, and what I put together is what I call a Fox rod. You can build one yourself. This one is a pretty good example. It's a $60 Redington rod. It's a 9-foot 8-weight, but what's important is it's got a fighting butt on the end. Put a Skagit line on this. The Skagit line is set up so that it's around 3 to 3.5 times the rod length, and in this case the Skagit line itself is exactly 33 feet. And it needed to be 32, so it's actually perfect. No cheater, no nothing. You take a leader, 17-pound test mono. That's it. That's all that there is. That's maybe 1 rod length plus a foot longer than the rod, and that's all that you need. Tie that onto the end of the hook, and you have a pretty darn good setup here that's going to let you work up to 2 rod lengths close. Up to 2 rod lengths close to your line, which is only 18 feet away. I can work in here, 18 feet. I can be moving this hook around, looking for bass and stripping, and there's still enough mass in that line that I can actually cast that kind of a hook, throw it around. Or, if I need to go farther, there's a 32-foot line, a 10-foot leader, so there's 42 feet. And I can work out that far. Or if I need to toss something bigger, there's the magical number. I have an 80-foot effortless roll cast. A roll caster, in this case, I can use spey techniques. The idea is this: I can't throw something back here that's that heavy. I'll be in the bushes all the time getting hooked up. And if I walk out in the middle of the river so that I can do a traditional back cast, I'm standing right where the bass are. The bass are along the shoreline on these rivers. You have to cast up and down the river, maybe 30 feet from the shoreline. That's where the smallmouth are, and occasionally they're in the big crevices right down in the river. So you got to be able to work in both places. Enter the fox rod. The fox rod lets me do that kind of a cast. I can stay here and work in water that's only up to my knees casting. I can strip all the way to within 2 rod lengths of the end of my rod, so I can come within 20 feet of where I need to be. I can continue to work here, working where the fish is, continue stripping. But if I see something that's actually jumping out in the middle of the river, I can throw a 50-foot cast, or I can pull out a lot of line and I can fire off. There's a 90-foot cast with the same rod. 90-foot cast with a 9-foot rod. Do the math. That's 10 times the rod length. That's what everybody hopes they can do with a spay line. But I can let it drift, or I can strip it in, and I can strip in 50 feet if I need to. I can put that 90 feet upstream and strip it down in knee-deep water looking for that fish. But what's cool is with the fox rod, because it's so short, I can continue stripping. I don't have to stop at 60 feet. I can bring it all the way into 50, all the way into 40, all the way into about 20 feet right up here, and continue to work right here. So you have this massive swath of water that you can actually cover with a rod like this. Anywhere from within 20 feet from the rod tip, or even closer, within 10 feet of the rod tip, all the way out to within 90 feet of the rod tip. So you're going to just sit and watch me for the rest of this. Watch me work this entire swath with one rod. I can work up close, I can work far away, I can cast, I can drift, I can strip. You'll see some modified aerial casts, but most of the time you're going to see real lazy, single-handed spays like that are in the 80-foot range, in case you're curious. In fact, I'm going to stand back here about 80 feet from the camera and cast, just to show you what that looks like. There I am right now, 50 feet from the camera. So you got effortless 50-foot casts that you can sit and strip, and you're going to get about 30 feet to strip. Bring it back. Let's go back here 60 feet. Now I'm at about 70. In fact, there's about 80 foot. Right on the camera at the 80-foot range, effortless. And I get to strip about 50 feet back in looking for that bass. That is an amazing rod. But what's cool is, it's not just about distance. If I have the distance if I need it, but what I can do is actually stay in close here too. Now I'm only 20 feet from the tip of my rod. I can sit and work the river right here with normal casts. And it's not hard on my arm. I can do spiral lifts, treble clef lifts. And if I see something off in the distance that I need to fire a line to, back to the 80-foot cast, back to the stripping. So you've got all this functionality, all this flexibility built into this one rod. And chances are you already own it. You just never thought to put a Skagit line on it. So I'm going to let you sit and watch me a little bit more until you can convince yourself you need to get a Skagit line. What's a Skagit line? It's just a humongous humongous heavy line. It's probably 320 grains inside 32 feet. But you'll be surprised that even with an 8-weight rod, you don't feel it. It's really, really easy to use. In fact, I probably wouldn't even use an 8-weight rod. An ideal rod for me would probably be a 6-weight rod, but still has to have the fighting butt, because it is a two-handed cast. A two-handed cast is probably ideal. All right, I'm going to let you sit and watch for a while. .90-foot. Actually slightly into the wind. Here's a 90-foot cast. Most guys throw it bass hard more than they wish they could do. I'm about a foot from the camera lens. Now I'm at 95 feet. Oh, rat lost it. How many of you guys want to do 95-foot casts looking for bass? Not dangling the rod in the river, hanging something really heavy down. You just haven't figured out how to make your rod cast it. That's not fly fishing, that's tenkara. You know it and I know it. This is fly fishing. Oh, oh, oh. Apparently my bass are listening. There's a 95-foot, well, I'm 100 feet from the camera throwing 95 feet. Got one. This is what I'm trying to make everybody understand. Don't worry, he's a bass. He can wait a couple of seconds.